Okay, so I'm an occupational therapist. Most people actually don't know what an occupational therapist does. So what I do is I work with individuals to try and get the best out of them, to make them the most functional that they can be. Bev is the talker, she teaches the speech and the language. I focus more on the actual doing, the physical acts. So what we really want them to do is to be able to manage their behavior, be able to control that anxiety, and be able to use the skills that they have got in the best way possible. As Bev said, everybody's an individual, everybody has their own goals, their own agendas, and we're going to try and help facilitate that, and I'm going to try and give you some strategies to help you to make everybody the best that they can be. So individuals with Fragile X have some sensory and perceptual processing issues, which we'll discuss more about, and this affects how they receive information from their environment and their ability to use that information and to learn effectively. What everybody here is doing is trying to help facilitate that learning and that interaction with that environment to make them the most independent adults that they can be. So first I'm going to look a little bit more at the behavioral characteristics we see. There's a lot of social anxiety. Behaviors include hand biting, flapping, pacing, often biting of the hands and the thumbs, poor eye contact, sensory disorders, which is my sort of hobby horse and what I love focusing on. There is an increased risk of aggression, and that aggression is purely that ABC that Astra mentioned. That is the behavior that is manifesting as a result of that antecedent they can't cope with. Often associated with ADD, ADHD, autism, and autistic behaviors. There is that intellectual disability, and as Jonathan said, it's not that the females are less affected, they're just better at masking it. They're often diagnosed a lot older because they somehow manage in social situations a lot better. Fragile X individuals have a lot of strengths, and we have to capitalize on these strengths so that they can learn, so that they can do things. The first thing is that they are great visual learners, so we are going to use that in every single thing we do. Use those visual capacities, and let's show them rather than tell them. As Bev said, they are Gestalt learners. They learn better when they see the whole picture, when they know what the expectations are. They are not step-by-step sequential learners. They are often motivated by the end product. They don't like leaving anything unfinished. Great imitation skills. They are very thoughtful, and the reason why we love working with Fragile X is their great sense of humor. They come in, they tell us the funniest things. They are often quite melodramatic in the way they do things as well. So as Loretta said, one of her best coping strategies is having a visual schedule and just having a routine. So what is a visual schedule? A visual schedule is pictures showing exactly what needs to be done, and it can be over varying time frames, and not to say that you can only have one visual schedule. You can have a monthly planner, a weekly planner, a daily planner, just showing exactly what is going to happen throughout that day. If they can read, it can be a series of words. If they can't, a series of pictures. We also need to include familiar people in these plans. So if a certain person is picking them up from daycare or, the day program, have a picture of that person when they get back on the bus to come home so that they know exactly who to expect. If it's a Monday and Bob's the driver, we want his picture next to the bus. Tuesday, Fred's the driver, we want his picture next to the bus. The more predictability we can give by using visuals, the better the hyper-arousal and anxiety are in check, and the more they can function and feel calm and relaxed. Visuals are an ongoing function. Often people say to us, oh, he is doing beautifully with the visuals, can I stop using them? The answer is no, never. They are still Fragile X, they still need visual support, and because something is working well, don't think you can stop using it. Why would you change a good recipe? If something is working, continue to use that same visual schedule. And you may think they don't need it anymore. This is all routine, they know what they're doing. The truth is, their executive functioning isn't great. Recalling those facts, recalling those sequences, those memory things are really difficult for them. Just to have it in front of them, they just know exactly what's going to be happening. Here I've got a few examples of some visual schedules. This top one up here with Madison, that is the morning schedule, exactly what is happening. Then it presents the afternoon, and then the evening. There are various different ways of doing visual schedules. I always like them to be pretty flexible, so we don't want something that's beautiful and laminated, because unfortunately, life doesn't carry on. There are changes, and we need to be flexible. Flexibility is a great issue for individuals with Fragile X, and we need to help them so that when something changes, we can represent it. On the right here, I've got one, which is a visual schedule, which would just be 3 things. And I don't know if you can see at the top, it says now and finished. So this is what the person is doing now. And when they're finished, they take it from there into that little finished box and then move on to the next thing and into the finished box. And they like to see completion, so they will get those things done. The same thing can happen. You might be doing an activity session with a group of young adults and be playing different games. If you can give them a schedule of these are the 4 things that we're going to do in this session together, that kind of brings down their anxiety immediately. They know what's going to happen, what to expect, and then there's an end point. Individuals with Fragile X do not like open-ended questions. They like to know, I am going to end this day program at 4 o'clock. I am having dinner at 5 o'clock, a bath at 6 o'clock. This just gives them that bit of predictability. The other thing you can do is when somebody is doing a particular activity, give them that schedule. How are they going in the car? As I said, put in those bus drivers if they change. Where are they going? Coming back by car, and then they're going home. So those visuals provide predictability, and they help with transitions. Moving from one place to the next can be quite challenging. If we know what the next thing is, again, we've got that predictability. We're not saying the same thing over and over and over again. They can look at the pictures. And we can make it age appropriate. There are various different types of visuals. If I'd been giving this talk 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been talking about iPad apps, iPhone apps, and things like that. Some individuals can use them, some can't. As long as it's got pictures or words, it is a visual schedule, no matter how you do it. I'm going to talk about task schedules, and this is now something in addition to those daily routines. It's also a visual, and it actually shows the individual steps of how something's done. So this one would be going to wash your hands. Each task will have a particular schedule. This is from Boardmaker, for those of you that know it. They don't have to be printed and laminated and beautiful. Seriously, when we do our therapy sessions, the whiteboard is our best friend. We draw on every single thing we're going to do, and if there's going to be a change, we go, oh, we've decided we're going to put that last, but we show it every single time. So this is just a routine schedule, which you can put up in a bathroom. First, you turn on the water, get the soap, rinse or rub hands, turn off the water, dry the hands, throw the paper towel away. This also ensures they don't leave out any steps. They're sometimes pretty good at turning on the water, getting the soap, rinsing the hands, turning off the water, and walking out the door. That sort of drying the hands and throwing the paper towel or hanging up the towel again just sometimes doesn't happen. And we just need to show them visually instead of somebody being there over their shoulder and nagging them. Now, this is really the domain of occupational therapists. Not all occupational therapists are trained in sensory processing, but as Astra mentioned before, it's how we process that information that comes in from our environment and how we act upon it. It also relies on how we process information within our body. So your body at all times is giving you information. It's telling you right now that you're sitting down on a chair, that you're facing the front, and where your body is in space, the proximity you are in to the person next to you, whether your legs are folded, whether they're unfolded, whether your feet are on the floor. These are all operating at a subconscious level. You're not thinking how you're sitting and what you're doing. It just sort of happens automatically. Unfortunately, with the neurobiology of a Fragile X and the way their body is designed, it's not quite as good, and they're not getting that constant feedback about what their bodies are doing. By the same token, they're also not getting the same kind of information from the outside world that we are getting. And as we said, often they're getting too much information and can't filter out what is relevant and irrelevant. So what your jobs are is to actually try and help them with that sensory processing to make better sense of the world so that they can respond to it better. Now, I am going to ask for a volunteer. Okay, I'm going to tell Sarah I come from Melbourne about my trip getting here yesterday. Hi Sarah, my name's Bev. How are you?
Good.
Oh well, Sarah, you know, I came on the V-Line train yesterday. We actually nearly missed our train, would you believe it? We came from the station. First train was cancelled. Second train, running late. We were panicking. We actually didn't know how we were going to get here, and if we were going to get here in one piece at all. Thanks, ladies. Are you okay, Sarah?
Yeah,
How did that feel for you?
yeah, it was really intense.
Okay, describe it a little bit more.
Well, I really couldn't. I couldn't stand looking at your face anymore because of the information coming at me, and it was really hard to not focus on the noise. And the job of trying to understand what you were saying to me was too hard.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, and I hope you don't have that experience again. Thank you. That's just to demonstrate to you what some of those Fragile X individuals are feeling like. They cannot filter out that irrelevant information. She said she had a hard job focusing on what I was trying to say and hearing me, because they cannot filter out the air conditioner in the background, the lawnmower that's mowing the lawn out there, the tram or the train that's going past 10 kilometers away. They are hearing all these things. They are hypersensitive to everything. There may be a fly or a bee buzzing somewhere in the room. They'll be tuning into that fly or bee. We aren't even aware of it. We can filter it out. We can attend to what's important, and that is what is so difficult for them. So I'm going to move on to a few things where we actually look at what can we do to make those environments a little bit kinder, and how do we reduce all those inputs. The ABC, the antecedent, behavior and consequence, has been spoken about quite a lot. What I'm doing as the OT is I'm looking first at the antecedent, the event preceding the behavior, and how can I change that so that we get the type of behavior we would like, the expected versus that unexpected, unpleasant type of behavior we sometimes see. Okay, so the individuals with Fragile X have a real difficulty responding to the environment, and the reaction seems out of proportion to what the stimulus actually is. So they may say, "Get away, leave me alone," when somebody has merely brushed past them. What they are perceiving is a totally different experience. They are perceiving that somebody is brushing past them or trying to hurt them or annoy them, because they don't have that good awareness from their body of how close that person actually is to them and what they are feeling. So they are in this constant state of hyperarousal, difficulty understanding where their body is in the environment, and difficulty filtering out what is important. Now, Astra mentioned these levels of arousal. So when we all woke up this morning, our level of arousal was low, and it's absolutely normal for a person to go through various different levels of arousal during the day. We're all sort of a little bit aroused, but not very aroused. If we were at a footy game, we'd be much more aroused. If we were actually playing that footy game, our level of arousal would really be high, because we'd be so vigilant and so alert, waiting for that ball, watching the other players, and actually taking part in that game. So depending on what activity you do, your level of arousal does fluctuate during the day. But I don't need to be on hyper alert when I'm sitting at a table taking some notes. I want to be pretty calm. I want to know who's next to me. I want to know what's going on. And so my level of arousal should be in that optimal zone over there. When we're in a low level of arousal, we're really not responding. So anybody who is in a low level of arousal, I'm looking for you. They're probably sleeping and not listening to me, because their arousal level is so low that their brain actually isn't registering that information. I don't see anybody pacing around the room in a high level of arousal either. So we've got to try and keep that level of arousal in an optimal level. And as I said, depending on the situation, it will be different. So we need that optimal level of arousal for optimum functioning. Individuals with Fragile X have a higher baseline of arousal. Sometimes medication can help that and that anxiety. Other times we actually need to change environments to accommodate for that. And hyperarousal, the reason we've mentioned it over and over and over again, is this really affects the behavior of Fragile X individuals. This is what makes them so different from anybody else. So what do? We can't filter, we can't cope, and we actually start producing undesirable behavior. So when you see these behaviors, you need to take a step back and think, why are they behaving in this way? What is making them hyperaroused? And how are we going to change it? As mentioned, there's often this flight, fight, or freeze reaction where they either run away because they are so overwhelmed by that environment and by what is going on at that moment. Fright is they just panic, and freeze, they literally do not move. They cannot speak, they cannot do anything. And what is actually happening is there is a neurobiological response happening. So our body is actually producing adrenaline at that stage. And these are the things that are really happening to them. This is a real biological response. It's not something that, they just don't like it, so they're behaving badly. Their blood pressure and heart rate are going up. They have an increased breathing rate, more blood to the brain and the muscles. If there's enough blood to the muscles, that's when they're going to flee, because the muscles are now ready for action and ready to run away. Raised sugar levels, sweaty palms and soles, dilated pupils, erect hair, and sometimes you actually see that reddening of the face and ears, particularly if it's something that is happening and it's a demand that's been made and there's a sudden increase in arousal level. So they might become hyperactive, impulsive, distracted, start rocking or flapping. Stereotypical behaviors often include that pacing up and down where they just can't stop themselves. Sometimes they're impulsive behaviors where they'll do things that we're like, they don't usually behave like this, what is going on? They may cover their ears or eyes to actually try and get rid of all that stimulation because they realize they can't cope with this. That rapid or repetitive speech that Bev mentioned, perseverative or tangential language, biting their hands or clothes, and they may actually become aggressive. And I think particularly with some of the men, this is a potential danger for caregivers and those around them. So what are we going to do in these overload situations? The first thing you're going to do is actually start recognizing that this person is going into sensory overload. Because if you can start recognizing when they're going into sensory overload, you can change what's going on and stop those bad behaviors. So if we grab that antecedent in time, we can do it. Don't talk more than necessary. Let's rather use the visuals and not talk more than necessary. When they're starting to go into overload, there's something called co-regulation. So if I'm all hyper and I say, stop shouting, stop, 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 I'm making a noise. I'm going crazy. If I say to them, I don't think that this is a good way to behave. We really need to calm down. Let's try and talk about this in a calm, gentle manner. They're going to respond to me. So whatever I've done, and I see it so often with parents, that the person starts getting hyper aroused and they start talking louder and at a higher pitch, and the mum starts saying, let's calm down, let's do that. Well, that's not going to help anybody to calm down. So you need to be very aware of your own body language, the tone of voice you're using, and the volume of voice you're using. Don't come too close to them when they are going into overload, because the closer you get to them, you're going to send them over that edge. Again, we've got that hyper arousal. Don't overreact to aggression. Sometimes it's actually just best left alone. Just leave them to actually calm down in their own time. And when somebody is overloaded, they actually become irrational. It's like an out-of-body experience. They're having that meltdown. They cannot talk to you at that time. They can't even listen to you because that is not what their brain capacity is at that time. They're just so overloaded. So they just want to get out of the situation. As unpleasant as it is for us to be around them, it's more unpleasant for them to be in that actual situation. So remove them from the situation if you can. It's often just, there's a book, and I can't think who wrote it. It's called Too Loud, Too Bright, Too Loud, Too Bright, Too Fast. And that's what they sort of feel. This whole world is just too loud, too bright, too fast. So take them away from that situation. We're not putting them in a naughty corner. We're removing them to a quieter environment, which is just a little bit kinder to them, where there are not people rushing past them, where there's not huge noises, where there's not a lot happening. The 5-finger approach, we all have a hand. So everybody put up your hand. Okay, so the first thing is, sometimes when they get totally out of control, just say, stop. Everybody say stop. Stop. Okay, you're going to grab your first finger and say, stop. Stop. Take a deep breath. Show them. Visuals, take a deep breath. What do you need to do? And they have to actually formulate, what do I need to do? I've got to get out of here, or I need to sit down, or I need a glass of water. They actually need, I need to go to the toilet. They need to tell you what to do or show you in some way. Be very aware of those non-verbals as well. They may be using them and showing you what they need to do if they need to get out of there. How are you going to do it? We're going to stand up and walk to the door. And then let's do it. And take them by the hand and physically lead them out if that's the decision you've made, if that's what they have to do in that situation. If they're shouting at somebody, you may say to them, stop! Take a deep breath and do the breathing. What do you need to do? Calm down, stop shouting. The only thing you're allowed to shout is stop to get their attention, because sometimes they cannot actually listen or attend, and if you get their attention, they will then listen to you. How are you going to stop shouting? You're going to talk really softly. We're not going to talk at all. Let's do it. So and you can see each one is just a simple phrase or word. I'm not saying you need to stop what you are doing now. Now, what do we have to do? This behavior is unacceptable. We need to behave better. You're not saying all this verbiage. You're just giving them a few short things they need to do, and that will help them to move on, and we're giving them a visual to do it with. What to be after overload, and I think sometimes we don't actually recognize the impact going into meltdown or sensory overload has on the individual, and we expect them just to pick up and carry on moving through the day. They simply cannot do that. It takes the individual 10 to 15 minutes to recover from what I'm going to call an episode. It's not an instant recovery, so we actually need to take a step back and be very kind and very gentle for that time. Try to reduce stresses. So what I actually do with some of my younger Fragile X clients is I try and send them to a point where they're almost at sensory overload. And then what I try and do is teach them strategies and use the strategies at that point before they get into overload, so that we don't get the bad behavior, so that I can show them what it feels like to be near the edge and to come back. So you're not going to get them back. Once they're gone, and we can only practice strategies when they are really calm, when their anxiety level's down, when their hyperarousal's down, and when they're in a very kind sensory environment. So that's after the overload. Discuss what happened, listen, and develop the strategies at that time. Now, everybody's going to go home and do lots of thinking. I want everybody to think about what are the potential environmental triggers in each of your environments. And they're going to be different because every environment is slightly different. So there could be things like soft furnishings are needed to absorb sound. I know wooden floorboards are the fashion. They sound great, but these aren't good shoes for it. But sometimes just that droning of people walking up and down a passage can send them into overload. And it may be something simple like just putting a runner down a hallway to stop those shoes. It may be a clock, the ticking of a clock. I have a clock in my therapy room just to guide me how long my sessions are. I don't even hear the clock. A lot of them go, I can hear that clock ticking. I sometimes have to take the clock off the wall and put it outside somewhere else because they cannot focus on what I'm doing. They are so distracted by that clock. Taps dripping, headphones, air conditioners, things like that. Be aware of lights. Fluorescent lights are often very overpowering for people with Fragile X. Sometimes we need dimmer lights, things like that. Side table lights. Sunglasses, when they're outdoors, they generally are a bit hypersensitive. Rochelle will cover those things more. Textures of things. They may hate sitting on that chair, but love sitting on that chair. And you're like, they're the same chair, but they may have different fabrics on the chair. They're aware of these things. They are sensitive to them. We are often not. Smells. I do not wear perfume to work. They do not, some of them do not like certain candles, and they'll walk in and go, oh, what stinks in here? And you're thinking, I can't smell anything. Their systems are also heightened, and they are in a slightly more aroused state. You need to just be aware. And when they say what stinks in here, take note of it and try and be the detective and work out what is that odor that they are not finding pleasant. I'm going to just gloss over the sensory diet. This is something that is individualized. It needs to be developed by your occupational therapist. But as we have a nutritional diet every day, and when I refer to a nutritional diet, I'm not looking to create supermodels. A nutritional diet is your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, and then morning tea and afternoon tea, your sensory snacks, I'm going to call them. In the same way that you have a nutritional diet to satisfy your nutritional needs, we have a sensory diet to satisfy our sensory needs. So they may need to get up in the morning and their arousal level is seriously low. They may need to go for a run around the oval, then come back, just to get that arousal level up a little bit for the day. We often rely on things like deep pressure, so anything that can provide deep pressure, and what it does is it helps them to stay calm, focused and organized throughout the day. And you'll have to obviously tell your OT, and here again we look a lot at personal preferences. What do they like? What is going to be appropriate in the situation? And this is where feed the need comes from. We don't want to say to them, stop fiddling, don't do that, don't chew on your collar. We're going to provide a more acceptable alternative to what they're doing, but recognizing they need that sensory input to modulate their arousal level. This is my favorite app. It's called the Sensory Treat, and what you do is you buy the app and then you just program into the phone usually what they should be doing at those different times during the day to keep them well regulated, and your OT can help you with that. Then we were talking about fidget toys. Astra mentioned it, Bev mentioned it. We need a whole variety of different things to keep them regulated. We don't want them chewing on their hands, chewing on their clothing, fiddling. I have some kids who love fiddling with my hair because it gives them that sensory buzz. We'd rather they were doing it with little objects that they can have handy all the time. So we're going to create a bit of an emergency toolkit, and here are some of the objects. So these are fidget balls and toys. I've put a whole lot of website resources, so you can really go and look on those for fidget toys. It also becomes a bit of a case of trial and error, what works for some, what doesn't. Kinetic sand is great for providing deep pressure input. Sometimes just when they're feeling a little bit stressed and they just need a bit of calming, get some kinetic sand, Play-Doh. Pillows and bean bags are also great. The other thing which I love, and I didn't have a picture of here, is called Theraband. So you can get this at physio places, tie a few knots in it, and it's a nice thing for them to pull and to interact with, and it doesn't make a noise, it doesn't make a mess. Sometimes I say if they're on a bus trip, put it around the bus seat and let them pull on it. It gives them that deep pressure and they find it very calming, and it's not interfering with anybody else. We can also use some visual things like lava lamps, oil, water distractors to calm them down, and then obviously music is very powerful. Bev mentioned some of the oral. I'm not going to go into that, and then we also have all the olfactory things. So smells can be really good. If you think of all those essential oils, from lavender calming, peppermint, excitatory, use different things, different times of day, different people, different needs. We've mentioned a few times that deep pressure is calming. So weighted products or pressure products are really good. Sometimes wearing skins like the sports people wear just provides pressure and compression onto the body. So it gives them a better idea of where their body is in space. So then they can manage when somebody comes into their personal space because they have a clearer distinction of their body boundaries. Weighted lap bags, weighted blankets are also very in vogue, helping with sleeping, helping with calming and to stay asleep. And then you'll also just need to get your OT to help you with things like the pressure vests, the weighted lap bags, the weighted blankets, because they do need to be certain weights so that they are not in any way dangerous to the individual. We also have things like sensory ear defenders over there. When environments are just too noisy, pop a pair of them on. They filter out external sound. We can eliminate sound, and then we can worry about all the visual things and whatever else is going on. And this could be in a train station, a supermarket, a restaurant. They can be really helpful. So here are some supplier details. If you go onto any of them and you just look for fidget toys or sensory, they will come up with a range of different things for you there. I'm just going to quickly touch on a few effective teaching methods with Fragile X, and this can be to teach things like unloading a dishwasher, making a meal, making a bed. Side dialogue, as I've just said, they don't like that forced eye contact. So if you talk to them on the side, we often sit next to them instead of directly in front of them. You can often get the message across in a less threatening way. Their arousal is in check and they can take in that message. Video modeling is also great. There are a lot of different YouTube things out there. Don't be afraid to model yourselves doing it, model somebody else in the house doing it, and show them what is required instead of telling them all the time. And we're using peer modeling. Now, backwards training. We've mentioned that they're Gestalt learners. They like the whole picture. So if I'm teaching somebody to tie shoelaces, I might do the knot, do the first bunny ear, do the second bunny ear. All they have to do is pull it through. But it's that sense of accomplishment and that sense of completion that that task is now complete, but we're going from the back end to the start. I'm not teaching them to tie that knot first. I'm doing 3/4, I'm leaving one step, and as they accomplish that step, I then move it up the next step. They're going to do that second bunny ear. So it's kind of a supportive teaching method, but because they are not good sequential learners, but Gestalt learners, that works really well. And they need to have an end point. If you're teaching them to make something in particular, if you can have an end product there for them to see and know what the expectation is, anxiety level is down and they can cope with the process so much better. I'm just going to mention this. I'm not going to talk much about it. It is a program called How Does Your Engine Run by 2 OTs, Williams and Schellenberger, and it teaches an awareness of arousal levels. It can be done individually or as a group program, and it just helps people to reach their optimum state of arousal, so keeping that arousal in check, and you can just mention that to your OT if you'd like to use it. I'm going to touch on transition objects because a lot of people have to get on a bus and go to a day program and then come back. And this has been an issue for a lot of adults that we see with Fragile X. They cannot move from one place to the next. So first we need our visual schedule with all that predictability, knowing who the bus driver is. And the other thing is a transition object. So I might come to you and say, can you take this ball and give it to Mary when you get to the day program? Your focus then becomes on that ball and safely delivering that ball to Mary at the day program. You're not worrying so much about the journey and what that's going to entail. So I'm sort of diverting your focus to a physical object. It can be the same object every day. So they need to take a backpack to the day program. They need to take a specific item to that day program, a hat, sunscreen, whatever it may be. Or each day can be a different item. They may not need that transition item every day either. I might say, can you give her a note today? Can you deliver this box tomorrow? But just to keep the focus off that transition and rather on the item. And that sometimes helps them getting into an unfamiliar place as well. So they've come to a place for the first time, you've done all the preparation, you've given them the visual schedule, you've shown them where to go, but anxiety is still high. Focus on a familiar item and let them transition in with that item. So the individual with Fragile X learns best and can give of their best when they are calm. And I think if everybody can just focus on how do we keep that arousal in check, how do we keep it calm, what environmental things do we need to change, what personal things do we need to change in their environment, then we can get the best out of our Fragile X individual. Thank you all for coming and listening.